The fabric tore with a savage rip that echoed like a gunshot through the silent classroom. Gabriel felt the cool air hit his exposed chest before his mind could catch up the torn edges of his button-down shirt flapping open under Tyler's clenched fist. In that frozen heartbeat, every fear he had buried for years surged forward like a tidal wave. Would this be the end of the careful life he had built in this quiet Colorado suburb? Would the principal call him in tomorrow? Would the parents storm the school demanding his resignation? And worst of all, would Seth finally see how fragile their hidden world truly was? Gabriel stood there, chest heaving, not from pain, but from the raw terror clawing at his ribs. He had always known this moment might come, the subtle stares, the whispered jokes in the hallway, but never like this, never with his students watching wide-eyed and phones already sneaking out of pockets. Tyler's face was flushed with triumph, or maybe something deeper. Gabriel could not tell, yet the 17-year-old's eyes held a flicker of something beyond simple cruelty, a shadow that mirrored the self-hatred Gabriel had carried in his own youth. Why now? Why, in the middle of a discussion on identity and literature, had Tyler snapped, grabbing the collar and yanking hard enough to send buttons scattering across the linoleum? Gabriel's thoughts raced in frantic circles. I cannot break here, not in front of them. I have to stay calm for the kids who are already scared, but inside he was shattering, the carefully constructed armor of professionalism cracking under the weight of exposure. He could already picture the headlines: local teacher outed in class, the conservative community he had tried so hard to blend into turning against him, and Seth waiting at home with dinner ready, unaware that their fragile peace was tearing apart just like this shirt. The classroom buzzed with gasps and nervous laughter, but Gabriel locked eyes with Tyler, searching for the boy behind the bully, and in that instant he chose not to shout, not to fight back, but to speak softly. Tyler, what is really going on here? The words hung heavy. Tyler's grip loosened, slightly confusion flashing across his face, as if he had expected screams or tears instead of this quiet question that pierced straight through his armor. Gabriel's heart pounded harder now, the internal storm raging louder than any external chaos. He thought of Seth's gentle smile from their last secret weekend, the way his partner had whispered, "We cannot hide forever, love," and now here, it was the hiding exposed in the most public, humiliating way possible. He felt the sting of tears threatening, but pushed them down, focusing on the boy in front of him, whose shoulders were starting to tremble, not from rage anymore, but from something far more vulnerable. The bell rang distantly, signaling the end of class, but no one moved, everyone waiting to see what would happen next, and Gabriel knew in his bones that the next few minutes would change everything he had fought so hard to protect. As the students filed out hesitantly, Tyler remained rooted, pulling Gabriel by the torn sleeve toward the empty hallway, his voice cracking for the first time. "I did not mean it like that, Mr. Ramirez, I just..." The words trailed off, but Gabriel followed, heart still racing, mind flooded with the fear that this apology, if it came, would be too little too late for the life he had built with Seth, the life that now felt like it was slipping through his fingers like the scattered buttons on the classroom floor. Inside, he screamed at himself, "Why did I ever think I could keep this secret in a town like this? Why did I drag Seth into my closet with me?" And yet beneath the panic, a tiny spark of hope flickered. Maybe this tearing open was the only way to finally breathe free. In the dim hallway light, Tyler's shoulders slumped forward, his fists unclenching as he stared at the floor, the torn shirt still clutched in one hand, like evidence of a crime he suddenly regretted. Gabriel leaned against the locker, feeling the cold metal press into his exposed skin, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the whirlwind inside him, memories of his own high school years flooding back, the night his father had slammed the door on him after he came out at 18, the same raw shame now reflected in Tyler's downturned eyes. "I saw you last week, Mr. Ramirez," Tyler muttered, voice barely above a whisper. "Helping that kid from my neighborhood, the one everyone calls names. I thought if someone like you could be strong, then maybe." The sentence broke off, but Gabriel heard the unspoken truth. The boy was fighting the same battle Gabriel had once lost so publicly, and in that moment the humiliation of the ripped shirt faded, replaced by a deeper ache for the child Tyler still was. Gabriel's mind raced back to the first time he met Seth at a quiet Denver coffee shop 2 years ago. Seth's laugh cutting through the noise like sunlight, the way he had listened without judgment when Gabriel confessed how scared he still was to live openly. Now that same Seth waited at home, probably texting to ask how the literature discussion went, unaware that their shared secret had just been ripped wide open in front of 30 teenagers. The guilt twisted sharper inside Gabriel. I promised him I would try to be braver, but here I am, still hiding, still letting fear dictate every choice. And now this boy is looking at me like I hold the answers I never found for myself. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, tears welling up. "I'm sorry I ripped your shirt. I was angry at my dad again. He caught me looking at some magazine, and he said things that..." The confession hung heavy. Gabriel placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, feeling the tremor there, and whispered, "I know, Tyler, I know what it feels like when the world tells you who you are supposed to be. Inside Gabriel's chest, the conflict roared louder than ever. Part of him wanted to run home to Seth and collapse into those safe arms, begging for reassurance that their love was worth every risk. But another part, the teacher, the survivor, knew he had to stay here and guide this boy through the darkness he himself had barely escaped. The school bell echoed again, reminding him of the next class, but he ignored it, focusing entirely on Tyler, whose apology was unfolding not as defeat but as the first crack in his own armored heart. Gabriel thought of their Miami trip last summer, the sun warming their skin as they walked hand in hand for the first time without glancing over their shoulders, the pure joy of that moment now clashing violently with the fear that such freedom might never be safe again in their real life. Why do I always choose safety over truth? He asked himself silently, the question burning hotter as Tyler lifted his head, eyes red but sincere. I will tell the principal. It was my fault. Please do not lose your job. In that hallway, the weight of years of hiding pressed down until Gabriel felt he might break, but beneath it all a quiet resolve began to form. Maybe this humiliation was the push he needed to finally tell Seth the full truth, to stop living half a life, and to show Tyler that strength came not from tearing others down, but from standing up after being torn apart himself. The drive home that evening felt endless. Gabriel's hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles whitened, the torn shirt now buttoned with safety pins from the nurse's office, a pathetic reminder of how quickly everything could unravel. Seth would be waiting with that warm smile and homemade pasta, the kind of ordinary evening they both craved, but Gabriel's mind was a battlefield of doubt and longing, replaying the hallway conversation with Tyler over and over, wondering if his own compassion had been enough, or if it had only exposed his weakness further. I cannot keep doing this to us, he thought, the internal voice laced with desperation. Seth deserves someone who walks into rooms without fear, not a man who flinches every time a student stares too long. The memory of their Seattle picnic flashed unbidden, the way Seth had pulled him close under the golden light, whispering promises of a future where they could hold hands in public without looking over their shoulders, and Gabriel had believed it then. But now, with the school buzzing about the incident, that belief felt like fragile glass ready to shatter. When he finally pulled into the driveway as Seth was already at the door, eyes widening at the sight of the pinned shirt. What happened, Gabe? His voice soft but edged with concern that cut deeper than any accusation. Gabriel stepped inside, collapsing onto the couch, the weight of the day crashing over him in waves. I let it happen, Seth. I froze, and now the whole school knows or suspects, and I am so tired of pretending we are just roommates. The words tumbled out raw and unfiltered, his heart aching with the fear that Seth would finally see him as the coward he felt himself to be. But Seth knelt in front of him, taking his hands, the touch sending sparks of hope through the storm inside. We will face this together, Seth said, voice steady, yet Gabriel heard the underlying strain, the same strain that had grown over months of stolen weekends and whispered goodnights. Inside Gabriel's chest, the conflict intensified. Why do I always pull him into my shadows? Why can I not be the man he fell in love with, the one who danced with him on that Chicago rooftop without a care in the world? That night, as they lay together, Gabriel stared at the ceiling, replaying every choice that had led to this moment: the decision to teach in a conservative district, the choice to keep their relationship quiet, the fear that had kept him from introducing Seth to what was left of his family. The humiliation from class lingered like a bruise, but deeper was the regret for all the moments he had denied them, the simple joy of being seen, and in the silence he vowed silently to change. But the vow felt hollow against the rising panic that change might cost him everything, including the man breathing softly beside him. Morning brought no relief, only a call from the principal requesting a meeting, and Gabriel's stomach twisted with fresh dread, wondering if Tyler had followed through on his promise, or if the apology had been just another fleeting moment in a life full of broken trust. The principal's office smelled of stale coffee and old books. Gabriel sat rigid in the plastic chair, replaying Tyler's tearful words from the hallway, but now doubt crept in. Had the boy really meant the apology, or was it just a way to avoid suspension? Seth had offered to come with him, but Gabriel had refused, another choice born of fear that only deepened the rift he felt growing between them. I have to handle this alone, he had said, but inside he screamed for Seth's hand in his, the steady presence that had anchored him through so many quiet nights. The principal cleared his throat. We have statements from students, Mr. Ramirez, and Tyler has admitted his actions, but there are concerns about your conduct. Discussions on identity can be sensitive in our community. Gabriel's mind exploded with silent fury. Sensitive? How dare they call my existence sensitive when I have spent years biting my tongue to keep this job, to keep the roof over our heads for me and Seth? He thought of the Miami beach walk where Seth had spun him around laughing under the bright sun, their bodies close enough to feel the heartbeat of possibility, and now that memory clashed painfully with the sterile office where his entire career hung by a thread. I will not apologize for teaching empathy, he said, a loud voice steady, though his heart hammered with the terror of consequences. But the principal's nod felt hollow, leaving Gabriel to drive home again, carrying the weight of unspoken ultimatums. Seth was waiting this time with open arms, pulling him into an embrace that should have felt like home, but instead amplified the guilt. "I pushed you away again," Gabriel confessed into Seth's shoulder, "because I am scared that if they fire me, you will finally see I am not worth the risk." Seth's reply came soft but firm: "You are worth every risk, but Gabe, we cannot keep living like this, half in, half out." And Gabriel felt the words slice through him, exposing the raw nerve of his deepest insecurity, the belief that his love was a burden rather than a gift. That evening they talked for hours, the conversation circling back to their first meeting in Denver, the spark that had ignited despite Gabriel's walls, and as Seth recounted the moment, Gabriel's internal storm raged louder. "Why did I ever let fear steal so many years from us? Why do I still hesitate when Seth offers me the world?" The next day brought a text from Tyler thanking him for listening, and Gabriel stared at the screen, tears blurring his vision, the boy's gratitude stirring memories of his own lost youth, the family that had turned away. And in that moment, the emotional weight doubled, the humiliation from class now intertwined with profound sorrow for every version of himself he had abandoned to survive. Seth watched him from across the room, eyes filled with love and worry, and Gabriel reached out, finally bridging the distance with a single touch. But inside he knew the real bridge would require more than gestures. It would demand he tear down the walls he had built higher than any classroom door. The school board meeting loomed like a storm cloud. Gabriel paced their small living room, the pinned shirt from that fateful day now folded neatly on the table, a symbol of everything he had lost and everything he might still lose. Seth sat quietly watching the man he loved unravel thread by thread, and Gabriel's thoughts spiraled into darker territory. What if they force me out? What if Seth realizes he deserves someone who can give him sunlight instead of this perpetual shadow? The internal monologue grew heavier, each word a dagger. "I have sacrificed our happiness for safety for years, and now when the mask is ripped away, I still cannot find the courage to step fully into the light." Memories assaulted him, the Chicago rooftop where they had laughed until their sides hurt, Seth's arms around him, promising forever under that endless sky, contrasted sharply with the dread pooling in his stomach at the thought of facing parents who might pull their kids from his class. When Seth finally spoke, "We could leave Colorado, start fresh somewhere new," Gabriel felt a surge of love mixed with crushing guilt, because he knew Seth was offering escape, not because he wanted to run, but because he could no longer watch the man he loved diminish himself daily. The conversation turned raw, Gabriel confessing the nights he lay awake wondering if their love was strong enough to survive the world's judgment, and Seth's eyes filled with tears, not of anger, but of shared pain. "We have survived worse, Gabe, but I need you to choose us, not just survive us." That night's sleep evaded Gabriel, his mind replaying every tender moment, the Seattle picnic, the Miami waves, the way Seth's laughter had healed wounds he thought permanent. And yet the fear persisted, louder, now amplified by the possibility of public scandal. Morning brought Tyler at his door, the boy standing awkwardly on the porch. "I told my dad everything, Mr. Ramirez, and he did not hit me this time. He just listened." And Gabriel felt something crack inside him, the boy's progress mirroring his own stalled journey, forcing him to confront how long he had let fear silence his truth. Seth joined them later, the three of them sitting in the kitchen where Tyler shared fragments of his own hidden struggles, and Gabriel listened, heart aching with empathy, but also with a deepening self-reproach. "Why have I waited so long to model the bravery I preach in class?" As Tyler left with a tentative hug, Gabriel turned to Seth, the weight of the day pressing down, until he whispered, "I think I am ready to stop hiding." And in that moment, the emotional floodgates opened, years of suppressed longing and terror pouring out in quiet sobs that Seth held him through, promising that whatever came next, they would face it together. But even in the relief Gabriel's internal voice whispered doubts, the path ahead felt steeper than ever, the choice to come out fully, carrying the risk of losing the job, the community, the fragile peace they had carved out, and yet for the first time the alternative, hiding forever, felt even more unbearable. The decision to speak at the school assembly hit Gabriel like a second rip, the stage lights harsh on his skin as he stood before the entire student body, Tyler sitting in the front row, eyes wide with something like pride. Gabriel's heart thundered with a mix of terror and liberation, every word he had rehearsed now tangled with raw memories of the shirt tearing, the hallway confession, the nights he had cried in Seth's arms questioning his worth. "I have spent years afraid to be seen," he began, voice steady at first but cracking as the internal storm surged forward, "afraid that loving another man made me less of a teacher, less of a man, and in that fear I hid not just from you, but from myself." The auditorium fell silent, students shifting uncomfortably, but Gabriel pressed on, his mind flashing to Seth waiting backstage, the man who had loved him through every doubt, every compromise, and the thought fueled him forward. "I was wrong to hide, because love is not something to be ashamed of. It is the bravest thing we can offer the world." Inside, the conflict peaked, years of self-denial clashing violently with this new vulnerability, the fear that parents would complain, the worry that Seth might one day resent the spotlight, but beneath it all a profound release bloomed like sunlight after endless rain. After the assembly, Tyler approached again, this time with his father beside him, the man extending a hand in awkward reconciliation, and Gabriel accepted it, feeling the weight of generational healing settle on his shoulders. Yet his thoughts turned immediately to his own estranged parents, the ones who had never offered such grace, and the ache deepened into something almost unbearable. That evening, Seth pulled him close on their couch, whispering, "You were incredible today." But Gabriel could only nod as the emotional tide rose higher. "I almost lost you in all that hiding. I almost convinced myself I did not deserve this life we built." The confession tore something open inside him wider than any shirt ever could. They talked deep into the night, Seth sharing his own quiet fears of being the secret partner, the one always waiting in the wings, and Gabriel listened with fresh eyes, realizing how his choices had wounded the man he loved most. The regret burned hot. "I have asked you to carry my silence for so long, Seth, and for what safety that was never real." And in the quiet between words, Gabriel felt himself breaking apart and reassembling, stronger, yet more fragile than before, the love between them now raw and exposed in ways that both terrified and exhilarated him. Morning brought emails from parents, some supportive, some angry, and Gabriel read them with Seth's hand on his shoulder, the support steady, but the internal battle still raged. "How many more times will I have to prove I belong? How many more rips will it take before I stop doubting the man Seth sees in me?" Yet as the days passed, the emotional intensity only grew. Each conversation, each glance from Tyler in the hallway, reinforcing that this path, though painful, was the only one leading toward the freedom they both craved: the freedom to love openly, to dream publicly, to finally breathe without the constant fear of being torn apart again. The phone call from his mother came without warning, her voice tight with years of unspoken anger. "We saw the video, Gabriel, of you standing up there talking about your life," and Gabriel felt the ground shift beneath him, the old wounds reopening wider than the classroom incident ever had. Seth stood nearby, ready to intervene, but Gabriel waved him off, needing to face this alone, even as his mind screamed, "Why now, after all these years? Why does her disapproval still have the power to gut me like this?" The conversation spiraled into accusations and tears, his mother lamenting the son she had lost, the life she had imagined, and Gabriel countered with the truth of the man he had become: the teacher, the partner, the survivor who refused to hide anymore. Inside, the turmoil reached its peak, every childhood memory, every slammed door colliding with the image of Seth's patient love, the contrast so sharp it stole his breath. "I have built a life despite you," he thought, yet her words still landed like fresh blows, making him question if the assembly had been worth the renewed family fracture. When he hung up, Seth was there, arms open, and Gabriel collapsed into them, sobbing, the release violent and necessary. "I thought I was past needing their approval," but hearing her voice brought it all back, the boy who just wanted to be loved without conditions. Seth held him tighter, whispering, "You are loved without conditions right here," and the words soothed but also amplified the guilt for all the times Gabriel had withheld full commitment out of fear. That night, dreams tormented him, visions of the ripped shirt morphing into torn family photos, Seth fading into shadows, until he woke gasping, reaching for the real man beside him whose presence grounded him in the present. The following days blurred with media requests, school meetings, and quiet evenings where he and Seth revisited their story: the Denver meeting, the rooftop laughter, the beach walks, each memory now laced with deeper gratitude and sharper regret for the time fear had stolen. Tyler stopped by again, sharing how his own father was trying to understand, and Gabriel listened with a heart both full and breaking, the boy's progress a mirror forcing him to see his own stalled healing. The emotional weight became almost crushing. "I have fought so hard to protect everyone else, Seth, my students, even my past self, but who protects me from the parts of me that still believe I am unworthy?" Seth's answer came in a kiss, soft and affirming. "You do, Gabe, every time you choose truth over fear." And in that moment, Gabriel felt the last barriers crack, the decision solidifying to visit his parents in person, to confront the pain head-on with Seth at his side. The drive to his childhood home was silent, heavy with anticipation, and when his mother opened the door, eyes red from crying, Gabriel stepped forward, heart exposed, the confrontation raw and necessary, words flying like long-delayed arrows until exhaustion brought them to a tentative understanding. Driving back that night with Seth's hand in his, Gabriel felt the storm inside finally beginning to settle, not gone, but transformed into something quieter, more hopeful, the love between them now a beacon strong enough to weather any future tears. Standing on the same Chicago rooftop months later, Gabriel watched the city lights sparkle below, feeling Seth's arms wrap around him from behind, the wind gentle against their skin, carrying away the last remnants of old fears. The journey from that torn shirt to this open embrace had been longer and more painful than he could have imagined, each internal battle, each moment of doubt forging him into someone who no longer flinched at the world's gaze. Tyler had graduated, sending a card that simply said, "Thank you for showing me it is okay to be me," and Gabriel had read it with tears of pride, knowing the boy's path would be easier because of the stand they had both taken. Seth turned him gently, their eyes meeting in the bright daylight, the same spark from their first meeting, now deeper, wiser. "I am so proud of you, Gabe," he whispered, and Gabriel felt the words heal the final cracks, the ones he had carried since the classroom humiliation. In the quiet of that moment, all the sacrifices, the family confrontations, the school battles faded into perspective, replaced by a profound gratitude for the man who had waded through every storm. They danced slowly, just as they had in memory, the world below, unaware of the private victory unfolding above it, and Gabriel's heart swelled with the certainty that love like theirs was worth every rip, every apology, every tear shed along the way. Looking at Seth, he realized the true growth had not been in the public stand, but in the private choices, the decision to stop hiding not just from others, but from himself, the willingness to let Seth see every flawed, fearful part and still be loved. As the sun warmed their faces, Gabriel whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on us," and Seth smiled, the kind of smile that promised forever, the kind that had carried them through the darkest days. The life they were building now felt limitless: trips to Miami Beach's, picnics in Seattle parks, quiet evenings where no secrets lingered, and Gabriel embraced it all with open arms, the internal voice finally at peace whispering, "This is who I was always meant to be." Yet even in the joy of final reflection lingered the power of one moment of courage to ripple outward, changing not just his world but Tyler's and perhaps countless others still hiding in their own classrooms. True or false, the deepest healing begins only when we allow ourselves to be completely seen, even at our most torn and vulnerable.